Thanks, Dennis. So the theme tonight, blended, contrasted, or juxtapose, and what's the best relationship when old and new buildings sit together. You know, in my experience, I'll speak from my experience as a principal of Tribal Architects, but oftentimes the approach combines all three in different proportion. What I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight is actually quite a bit tonight is the process and our approach toward design in a historic context. I personally feel that the process is one of the more interesting things in terms of how one looks at the site, the factors that influences the conversation, the people, whether in the community or business interests that you have to be accountable to, and then the end result begins to form organically, more so than coming to it with preconceptions. And so for the project that we'll present here in a moment, it really is this process of design and discovery, in this case leading to a conclusion very different than conclusions that might have felt intuitive at the very start of the design process. It's also a project that is, I can't say currently on the boards, it's actually just started construction this week. The addition to the Rocky Mountain Seed Company building down on 15th and Market Streets in lower downtown just recently acquired a permit for the construction today, and we're going full steam ahead for something that I think will be very innovative and very different, and hopefully broaden the dialogue of the sorts of buildings that would be appropriate in lower downtown. And here's where the technology goes haywire. No, perfect. So just to give everyone a rough idea, obviously everyone knows what Lodo is, the 25 block area that was very heavily affected by urban renewal, but reclaimed as a very special, if not the one distinctive aspect of Denver in the 70s and the 80s. The site itself is down in the southern quadrant, so it's an interesting location within Lodo, being toward an edge. Actually much closer to some degree in look and feel to Larimer. Also, as one considers the proximity of Spear and Cherry Creek, you realize that it's also potentially a gateway site coming from the south, north along Market Street, from Auraria and from the areas right on that fringe. In fact, you pass this site, it's a very prominent corner, and very quickly get to 16th and Market Street, where the scale of the buildings increase dramatically, where you have transit-oriented development and major transit infrastructure. So it's interesting from that standpoint. Of course, the lower downtown zoning has height restrictions and design requirements that have been embedded in our codes for quite some time. One of those factors being a predominance of masonry expected in any architecture, addition, or new building in the area. The neighborhood obviously very diverse, and we were approached by the owners to see what we could possibly do with this corner. This map is interesting because the Lower Downtown Historic District, when it was formed originally, was maybe the best way to describe it an opt-in or opt-out district. There were a number of buildings that could be considered contributing, and a few landmarks, but not every property owner decided they wanted to take part and be recognized historically within this district. So a very defined boundary, quite a few commercial buildings. And it's interesting, but the site area, which is currently a surface parking lot adjacent to the Rocky Mountain Seed Building, which is immediately next to it, you can see the Seed Building is not designated as anything, although it's relatively intact and an excellent example of the sort of commercial architecture of that time. It was not opted in. So we had to understand it as not a historical landmark, but certainly contributing in its own way and worthy of being integrated or reintegrated with an addition into the neighborhood, regardless of its status. The surface lot used to be the site of the J.P. Fink block, and had a number of tenants over the years: clothing company, seed company, fruit company, all the industries of Denver of the time. And this is what the site looks like today. One of the many blocks that were cleared out for parking for office workers in the area. And you can see the nature of the site being where it is in the southern quadrant. You have the high-rise Larimer Place condominiums immediately behind it off Larimer. You have the Seed building here, an adjacent bookstore building, and the recently completed 16M in a much more contemporary style by Gensler. Very prominent corner, very walkable streets, but obviously some patch and repair in the neighborhood. As we know, the neighborhood's grown quite a bit over time. 16 Market Square, Palace Lofts, quite a bit of residential, leveraging the connections to trail, leveraging the transit station at Market Street. Different styles too, wildly different styles and eras. And then from the roof of the adjacent seed building itself, the potential of some views out toward Rarey, Sea Tivoli, and this really got us thinking about the possibility of how we could use the height of the building and occupy that rooftop and really capitalize on these little glimpses of views toward the mountains. So in terms of taking in other considerations, what was the condition of the building? The seed building had recently been renovated in 2014 by the owners. And it's interesting, it was designed, as many were, as an infill building with a primary facade of brick, a little bit of sandstone, and wood and iron storefronts. And then, of course, the side had been changed over time, adding windows. Stucco had been applied over some period of time to patch in the damage when the adjacent J.P. Fink building had come down. Very typical infill building. The interiors were spectacular. A lot of exposed structure, heavy timber. During the renovation, the contractor had added a number of steel beams and columns that were not there originally. So it started to take on this wonderful high ceiling loft appearance, but there were clearly some interventions that were recent, whether they were structural or elements of contemporary art. This is some of the existing advertising. It's in a conference room, and a couple new pieces, including a mural in the driveway that leads to the underground parking garage. That and just this interesting texture and character of the district that is still in existence in various ways. The nighttime view, we took this shot to begin thinking about what the building could be, how we could recapture the corner, the way that the Fink building held the corner in its day, but to do it in a very contemporary manner and heal this wound in lower downtown that never should have been made in the first place. The nighttime shot in our mind was pretty spectacular, and it got us thinking about a building as a lantern. I know kind of an overused metaphor, but it really got us thinking about a building that maybe was more transparent than solid. And obviously, that would be potentially very different than many of the buildings in the area that are predominantly masonry. Precedent. We'll go through these relatively quickly. Precedent, very important part of any approach to architecture in general, but certainly when you're dealing with a historic context, it's good to understand where can you break the rules, where the rules don't apply. So a couple examples from New York that take very different approaches in terms of scale, contrast, one using very modern, simple forms adjacent to a very articulate Renaissance revival piece of architecture. Another one is an infill in a very contemporary mode. We also thought about early curtain wall buildings in cities across the United States. This is the Halliday building in San Francisco. I think the AIA in San Francisco is actually in this building, recently renovated. One of the first glass and iron and steel curtain walls, obviously very transparent, and at the time struggling with how to provide kind of an appropriate historicist attitude toward a new building material. So this was an inspiration for us as well. And then recent buildings in and around Denver, one of my favorites, the Sugar Cube, in terms of just providing a very contemporary aesthetic that works well in lower downtown. And then from our own portfolio. And as you know, Tribe Architects has done quite a bit in Lodo and in the area, exploring how we can recapture unusual spaces, looking at different types of storefront systems that can combine glass and metal, contrasting visibility and transparency with the opacity and weightiness of masonry, down to our own office. And this facade as a reinterpretation, a modern reinterpretation of very classical lines and proportions. Taking all this together as a body of work and what the site started to teach us about what might emerge there, we began the design process. Now this parking lot is actually part of a one level below grade structured garage. So there was quite a bit here that we had to deal with, including an existing column grid, the fact that we were building over space. We had to maintain access, a very, very tight flag-shaped lot that includes the seed building, and then the new parking garage that was added as part of the 16M project up the street. Clearly, we were dealing with an interesting condition, two-sided building holding the corner. And the thoughts about what this building could be programmatically came to the foreground with the owner. It will be office space. It will be creative open office space for the industries of where Denver is going, not where Denver has been. But at times, we explored the possibility of ground floor retail restaurant. We explored the possibility of residential. The reality is a very small site. You don't want to try to do everything, but you want to do one or two things extremely, extremely well. So we tried to keep it very simple. The basic concept was to locate all service elements along the adjacent party wall to the bookstore building, allowing us to open up almost column-free space on the two sides, wrapped with a very open curtain wall system to physically connect the floor plates. Not on the first level, but on the succeeding levels, so that the building as a whole could operate together as a single floor plate. And this idea works up through the building on the second floor. And when you get to the top of the building, we took the opportunity of the LOTO design standards to step back the massing to create an exterior terrace. Again, pushed toward the corner so that people could occupy that space up 4 levels above the street. And then articulating this as a mezzanine, smaller than the floor plate below, but allowing light and air and visibility between these two floors. So that was a very fundamental approach to the massing of this building, and you'll see in a moment how that operates three-dimensionally. One of the other early decisions was on the structure. Rather than doing a very conventional concrete or steel frame structure, we decided to do a combination of glue-lam, tongue and groove deck, and exposed steel framing. Why? Well, there are many examples of warehouses in and around lower downtown where heavy timber plays a part. Not necessarily in this combination. But this led to an interesting thought when combined with the idea that the building could also be very transparent in a lantern. Perhaps the building architecturally on the exterior didn't have to try too hard. Perhaps the structure and the expression of that structure and the view of the ceiling. So we could take the best of all these wonderful warehouse buildings in lower downtown. When you go inside and you look up at that structure, passing by on the street with those small windows, you never know it was theirs. But if we could take that off and turn that inside out, then this building could express what we love about the interiors of so many of these buildings, but do it in a very transparent facade that would absolutely push the envelope and challenge Lower Downtown Design Review Board. Knowing how we approach buildings, we always look at the proportional study, the rhythm, the scale at different levels. The seed building itself is almost a perfect square, but it also has the essence of those 25-foot bays like the commercial buildings across the street. Could we interlace those scales while creating a defined base, middle, and top, and begin looking at a very contemporary elevation that, like our office, would have the essence of a classical approach? You know, the firmness, commodity, delight of those numbers, those special numbers, but to be constructed out of completely new, modern materials. And then, of course, through the Lower Downtown Design Review process, where the rubber really meets the road, we brought in a series showing how this building would allow you to incorporate the seed. So the seed didn't feel dwarfed by 16M, but now the seed building would have a companion, bringing the entire site together and making the seed building more significant when compared to this very rapid step up in mass and scale and window size. That was the approach on Market Street. And on the other side of the street, adjacent to the bookstore building, is very simple. Let's turn the corner with one idea, not 5 or 10 or 12, but one idea. Use the stair tower as a reveal against the historic building, and frankly, call it a day. Don't have to do too much here. Went through the design process with Lower Downtown, provided quite a bit of detail related to materials and articulation. These are all exposed custom steel plate girders. The entire facade is steel, custom steel, with inset of aluminum-clad wood window systems of various sizes and proportions. So it's a hybrid system, but it is very much truly a curtain wall in the sense that of a curtain wall in the early 20th century, which were often composed of separate elements, steel, aluminum, and glass put together. Just to go through a few three-dimensional views, again, this will be under construction fairly soon, but we came up with a very simple massing. You can see the step back of the roof terrace. We capped it with eyebrow features so it could be occupied during some weather. Set in the base and exposed the steel. Maintain a corner entrance. And then you can see the visibility of the structure in our Revit model through all sides. And on 15th Street. Craft was important to us. The articulation of the details. This is an example of a detail of the window system fitting within the steel framework that has quite a few layers of waterproofing, sealants, shimming, and this little diagram at the bottom is actually our energy analysis. It's an all-glass building on two sides. So we leveraged the fact that we had two party walls within the energy envelope to allow us to have a high degree of transparency on the two facades that were exposed, offset by super insulated party walls on the other two sides. Looking at materials, it's a composition that would be very familiar in Lodo. We have masonry, we have concrete in the stair tower and the floor systems, exposed steel and glass, the glulam subframing system and tongue and groove ceiling, and then a few elements of a weathered steel at the corner for the address band and in other areas at the terrace. This final element is interesting. This was one of a number of found objects in the SEED building. This happens to be a heavy canvas draft cover for a refrigerated boxcar. Happened to be on site. We have a number of these, and they will be stretched into a frame, and they'll be placed within as part of the interior design for the office tenant. So we have a number of these found objects, and they will become part of the what's visible through the glass. And then, of course, the execution down to the detailed level, and a building that really shows the craft of how it's put together. If you're going to be structurally expressive and you're going to allow that to be celebrated through a very transparent facade, you have to get the details right, because you will be scrutinized based on the performance of those details. Not just performance in terms of energy, longevity, but the artistry. The artistry, which is where modern architecture really began, was the merging of art and technology, craft. So this building will be a demonstration of craft, hopefully, if it's well executed. And then the interior design, just to wrap up, we were inspired by a number of recent renovations. These are shots from the model, Revit model, showing the open air, the exposed ceiling, the open floor plan, and then the space at the mezzanine that opens up to 2 stories, connecting to the exterior roof deck through a bridge. Very industrial quality of railings and other details. The tenant that's going in here is a technology startup, and we're very excited by the fact that now this building is a recapture of the corner, but representing the sorts of technologies and firms that are very much about where Denver is going, not where it has been. And the final result, which hopefully will look better than this rendering, will be open for business sometime in the fall of next year. And you guys can critique the heck out of it then. Thank you. Sorry, Dennis, I think I went a little over.